Imagine you are living in a European city hundreds of years ago. The streets, usually bustling with merchants' children, are eerily quiet. The Black Death has swept through your town, and fear hangs in the air like a thick, damp fog. Then, a figure approaches. It looks like nothing you've ever seen. Dressed head to toe in dark waxed canvas leather, a terrifying mask covers their face. A long, bird-like beak juts out, perhaps half a foot long. Round glass eyes stare back. This is the Plague Doctor, a silhouette haunting our memory for centuries. One of history's most potent, frightening images. Medicine was a world away from what we know today. It was a time of mystery, superstition, and a desperate search for answers. The Plague Doctor wasn't just a medic. They became a symbol of the plague itself. Their arrival was a dreaded sign, an omen that death might be at the door. People felt mixed emotions, a flicker of hope for a cure and the chilling certainty of pestilence. The costume was meant for protection, but it created a figure of nightmare fuel. The beak mask alone could send a shiver down anyone's spine. So, who exactly were these shadowy figures? Plague doctors were municipal physicians, meaning they were hired and paid by a town or city specifically to treat victims of the plague. This was an important distinction. They weren't necessarily the most respected or experienced doctors of their time. In fact, many were second-rate physicians, young doctors just starting out. Some weren't trained doctors at all. Former fruit sellers, other tradesmen who were simply willing to take on the incredibly dangerous and often fatal job of confronting the sick. Their duties were grim and varied. First and foremost, they were sent into quarantined areas to diagnose and care for plague patients, though care is a very generous term. Their treatments were often brutal and based on flawed medical theories. Bloodletting, cutting a patient to drain them of bad blood. Leeches, applied to achieve the same goal. Lancing the buboes, opening swollen lymph nodes to release the disease. It was a messy, terrifying, and almost always futile business. The doctors were there to offer what little comfort they could, but mostly, they were there to count the dead. Beyond treating the sick, plague doctors had important civic responsibilities, keeping records of the casualties for the public register. Their tallies helped city officials understand the scale of the devastation and track the spread of the disease, serving as witnesses for the last wills and testaments of the dying. Imagine one of the last faces you might see was this strange, beaked figure, there to officiate your final wishes. Now, let's talk about that extraordinary costume. The full head-to-toe outfit we associate with the Plague Doctor didn't actually appear during the Black Death of the 14th century. It was invented much later in 1619 by French physician Charles Delorme. He designed it as a kind of medieval hazmat suit. It was based on the prevailing medical theory of the time, the miasma theory. People believed diseases were spread through miasma, bad air, a foul vapor full of decaying particles. They thought blocking bad smells would block disease, so the costume was an ingenious if misguided attempt to create a complete barrier against poisonous air. The doctor wore a long waxed canvas or leather coat from neck to ankles. That heavy, greasy material was thought to stop miasma reaching the skin. They also wore leather breeches, tall boots, gloves, and a wide-brimmed hat, often to signify a doctor. Every inch of their body was covered. They even carried a long wooden stick or pointer. It let them examine patients, push them, and lift bedclothes, all without direct contact. The centerpiece was the beak mask. The mask was leather with round glass eyepieces to protect the eyes. The beak projecting from the nose was the most critical part. What then was the secret held within that long, strange beak? The beak mask was essentially a primitive respirator, and its long cavity was stuffed with a powerful and aromatic concoction of herbs, spices, and other sweet-smelling substances. This fragrant bouquet was known as theriac, a complex medicinal compound that could include more than 55 different ingredients. The exact recipe varied, but it was always a potent mix of things believed to have protective properties. Common components included dried flowers like roses and carnations, pungent herbs such as mint, lavender, and myrrh. They also used camphor and laudanum. The idea was that this overwhelming perfume would overpower the foul miasma of the plague, purifying the air before it entered the doctor's lungs. They believed that if all they could smell was the sweet scent of their herbal mixture, then the bad air of the disease couldn't possibly reach them. 2 small nostril holes were located near the doctor's nose, allowing them to breathe, but only after the air had been filtered through this intensely fragrant potpourri. Of course, we now know that the bubonic plague is caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis and is spread by fleas on rats, not by bad smells. And yet the plague doctor's mask may have offered a tiny, accidental measure of protection. Why does this story of the strange, beaked doctor still capture our imagination so powerfully today? On September 18, 2025, the tale of the plague doctor is more than just a spooky piece of history. It turned a human into something otherworldly. Understanding this image is the first step to unpacking the plague doctor's story. This was no costume. It was a real uniform, worn in one of humanity's most desperate times. Their look came from the science of the day, and discover the secrets the beak held.